When you think of Egyptian gods, a few big names probably pop into your head. Ra, Isis, Anubis. But hiding in the shadows of that massive pantheon is a goddess from the desert's edge. Some modern writers have called her the Ripper, a name that brings to mind pure ferocity and bloodshed. She's been called a war goddess, a divine berserker sent to tear apart the pharaoh's enemies. But here's the thing, those are modern titles. They're dramatic nicknames for a goddess who is way more complex and ancient than they make her sound. The real story behind the lioness goddess packet isn't just about war. It's a story about the hunt, the raw power of the wilderness, and a female pharaoh who carved her name next to this goddess's on the eternal cliffs of the Nile. To find the real packet, we have to ignore the flashy nicknames and head out to the lonely desert places she called home. The name Packet is basically a warning sign. In ancient Egyptian, it means she who scratches or she who tears. That's not a name you give to someone lightly. It's a direct nod to a lioness's ultimate weapon, her claws, but we're not talking about the organized chaos of battle here. This is the focused, lethal violence of a predator. Picture the sun dipping below the desert horizon, turning the baked earth into a kingdom of shadows. This was Packet's world. The ancient Egyptians didn't see her as a general. They saw her as the ultimate huntress. They gave her titles that nail this specific kind of power. Night Huntress with sharp eye and pointed claw. There's a line in the coffin texts that captures her perfectly. I have appeared as Packet the Great, whose eyes are keen and whose claws are sharp, the lioness who sees and catches by night. That was her whole deal. While a goddess like Sekhmet was the embodiment of the sun's scorching fury that could wipe out entire armies, Packet was the silent stalker in the dark. Her territory was the Wadi, the dry riverbeds cutting through the desert. She was literally the goddess of the mouth of the Wadi, a deity ruling the line where the fertile Nile Valley gives way to the harsh, wild desert. In art, you'll see her as either a full lioness or a woman with a lioness's head, sometimes wearing the solar disk of her father, Ra. A classic image shows her killing snakes with her sharp claws, a powerful symbol of a protector goddess destroying venomous, chaotic forces. This focus on hunting and protecting people from very real desert dangers, like snakes, scorpions, or just getting lost, is the heart of who she was. The war goddess label really comes from a misunderstanding of her ferocity. Hers wasn't the strategy of a battlefield, but the primal, deadly instinct of the hunt. To really get Packet, looking at old texts isn't enough. You have to go to the heart of her cult, to a place carved right out of the living rock of Egypt. About 28 kilometers south of the modern city of Al-Minya, there's a cliff face filled with ancient tombs. And right there, cut into the side of a wadi, is the temple known as the Spios Artemidos. That name is Greek. Centuries later, when Greeks occupied Egypt, they saw Packet the huntress and immediately connected her with their own goddess of the hunt, Artemis. So, her temple got a rebrand and became the Cave of Artemis, a name it still has today. But this place was built long before the Greeks showed up, by one of Egypt's most fascinating and controversial rulers, the female pharaoh Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut, a woman who ruled as a king in the 18th dynasty, ordered this rock-cut shrine to be made. It wasn't a huge, freestanding temple like you see at Karnak, but an intimate, cavernous space carved from the cliffs. Inside, a hall leads to a smaller, holier sanctuary where a niche was cut for her statue. Huge numbers of mummified cats and hawks have been found buried nearby, brought as offerings to the goddess of this wild place. The most important part of the Spios Artemidos is an inscription Hatshepsut left right above the entrance. In this 42-column text, she speaks directly, declaring that she has restored Egypt from the damage left by the Hyksos, foreign rulers who had occupied the land. She proclaims, "I have banished the gods' abomination, the earth removing their footprints." By restoring Packet's temple, Hatshepsut wasn't just paying respect to a local goddess, she was making a brilliant political move. She was positioning herself as the true pharaoh, the one who cleanses the land and restores cosmic order, or Ma'at. She was tying her own right to rule directly to this fierce, ancient goddess of the wild. Later pharaohs, like Seti I, came along and carved their own names over Hatshepsut's, trying to take credit for her work, but the temple is still her monument. The Egyptian pantheon was pretty fluid, with gods and goddesses often merging and sharing jobs. Packet is a really interesting piece of this divine puzzle, fitting somewhere between two other giant lioness goddesses, Bastet and Sekhmet. Sekhmet was the terrifying Eye of Ra, a goddess of war and plague whose bloodlust almost destroyed humanity until she was tricked into drinking a lake of beer dyed to look like blood. Bastet, on the other hand, evolved from a fierce lioness protector into the much-loved, cat-headed goddess of the home, fertility, and good times. Pakhet seems to strike a balance between the two. It's been suggested she started as a regional blend of these two goddesses in an area of Egypt that was a border between their main cult centers. She has the ferocity of Sekhmet, but channels it with the protective instinct of early Bastet. She's not the goddess of cosmic punishment, and she's not a gentle house cat. She's the wildcat of the desert, a different kind of protector altogether. This unique role as a huntress is exactly why the Greeks later connected her with Artemis. Artemis was the eternal virgin of the hunt, goddess of wild animals, and the untamed wilderness. While their religions were totally different, the Greeks recognized a shared archetype, the powerful, independent female god who rules the wild spaces outside of civilization. When they saw Pakhet's temple cut into a desert cliff, dedicated to a lioness huntress, the connection to their own mistress of the wild was immediate. So, if Pakhet was important enough for a pharaoh like Hatshepsut to build her a temple, why is she so forgotten today? Why isn't she a household name like Isis or Hathor? The answer probably lies in the fact that she was always a regional goddess. Her power was tied to a specific place, the desert cliffs and wadis around an area called Beni Hassan. That was her turf. While the great state gods like Amun-Ra had temples in every major city, Pakhet's cult pretty much stayed local. Her importance seems to have hit its peak during the Middle and New Kingdoms. She's mentioned in the Middle Kingdom coffin texts as a night huntress. But her main temple wasn't built until Hatshepsut's reign. She was called She Who Opens the Ways of the Stormy Rains, a title likely connected to the terrifying flash floods that could rip through the desert valleys after a storm. This shows her power was deeply tied to a specific environment and its dangers. She protected you from the things that could kill you right there. Over time, her roles were gradually swallowed up by the more dominant feline goddesses. As Bastet became more popular and gentler, and Sekhmet remained the ultimate symbol of divine wrath, the specific flavor of Pakhet's character got overshadowed. She didn't have a big, dramatic myth woven into the national creation story. She was a potent, fierce, and vital goddess for the people living on the edge of the desert, but her fame just didn't travel far. She wasn't erased. She was simply eclipsed, a common fate for thousands of local gods all over the ancient world. We started with a dramatic title, the Ripper, a war goddess of ancient Egypt, but the real story of Pakhet is so much more interesting. She wasn't a goddess of armies and battlefields. She was the spirit of the hunt, the embodiment of the fierce predator that stalked the desert night. Her name, She Who Scratches, was a warning about her lethal power, a power that could both threaten and protect. Her legacy is literally carved into the limestone cliffs at Spios Artemidos, a monument that ties her forever to the ambition of the female pharaoh Hatshepsut. She's a reminder that Egyptian religion wasn't one single system, but a rich tapestry of local beliefs. Pakhet's story shows us that to find the most fascinating parts of history, sometimes you have to leave the grand temples and journey to the wild edges, to the mouth of the wadi where the real hunters dwell. The stories of deities like Pakhet show how much is still buried under the sands. Which forgotten god do you think deserves their story told next? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to keep digging into the lost histories of the ancient world, make sure to subscribe.